So at this point, you should have your GitHub repo set up, specifically with your name here. I know I keep saying that, but it's going to become important. And your local environment, whether that's through Replit or through your computer, whether that's a desktop or a laptop, all of the above will work. Just kind of pick one and go with it, I think. But as long as you have your environment set up and your GitHub repo set up, then you're ready to actually dive into finally learning about HTML. And that's what this video will be about. My plan is to kind of just run through this written guide. So if you prefer written guides, you can do it that way, but I'm going to walk through it for folks who prefer kind of the video style and who want to see a little bit more detail. So before we really dive into HTML, I want to maybe just take a step back and think about web pages in general. So you've likely seen a web page before. If not, that's kind of interesting, but you probably have. But I'm not sure if you would have really thought about exactly what you're looking at. So let's just take, I don't know, kind of arbitrarily, I have this web page open. So let's kind of just look at it together and look at the kinds of content that it contains. So for example, it has this navigation bar at the top, which contains links. It has an icon up here, maybe some icons over here, a left nav with these expandable sections. And then the sort of body of the web page contains a bunch of text, which itself contains various types of content. So it's got heading, which is really big bold text, another heading, some regular text, and then maybe some lists, some other stuff, maybe some code examples, an image, all kinds of things. So I sort of encourage you to maybe just take a minute to, I don't know, maybe peruse the website you're on, this website, or just, any website really. So let's open up a new tab and here's my homepage, and it's got maybe an image here. It's got an input box here. Maybe this is a button or something. Here's some other buttons, and it's we can maybe do a search. And, more content, so a bunch of images, more input, some more navigation with icons and whatnot. And let's see, maybe one more level here. Is there a way to get to Wikipedia from here? Maybe. It's the wrong kind of cats. Still the wrong kind of cat. Interesting. Pick whatever web page you want. I'm trying to get to the cat Wikipedia page. It's one of my go-to examples. Here we go. So again, maybe just kind of think about what types of content are on this page. So here's an example. It's got it's a numbered list or something with sections in it, and all kinds of stuff with different sections and different formatting and all that good stuff. So again, I kind of encourage you to navigate the web over the next, little while, whether you take 5 minutes now or you just kind of keep it in the back of your head for the next few weeks. As you use the internet or as you use the web, look at the different kinds of content that you are interacting with, whether that's text or images or anything else. So that's kind of just getting us thinking about the kinds of content that is out there. So now let's talk about how that all works. So let's say we have these two lines of text. We have my website and we have welcome to my website. And by itself, that's just text. It's nothing is telling anything how to display it or what to display it as. It's just two lines of text that you could type in any text editor. But now we want to say, I want to display this as a heading and this as regular text. How do we do that? And, spoiler alert, you can probably guess that the final answer is HTML. But to explain HTML or to get to HTML, let's think about other ways we might do it. So I could go to Google Docs and I could probably create something like this, or maybe Microsoft Word or whatever your favorite word processor is. And you could use the sort of drop downs that format text and whatnot, and it would work. But let's say you're not using a word processor. Let's say you're using something like, I don't know, spoiler alert, a web browser. How do you specify how to display the text then? And the answer is something called markup. And markup is like an old word, actually. It means the kind of like formatting or kind of commenting, or I don't know the word for it, but the kind of extra information that you might have on a printed page. So here's an image that kind of explains what I'm talking about, where maybe in school you've printed out a research paper or something, and you handed it in, and then you got it back with like markup on it. Markup being like extra information that's not directly in the text itself, but is more maybe meta. It's about the text, or it kind of describes the text, or gives you more information about the text. That's a form of markup. That's a physical analog form of markup, but that's kind of where this word comes from the physical marking of papers. So then we get into markup languages, which is kind of markup that tells a computer what to do. So it tells a computer how to format text, or how to display text, or what type of content to display text as. And we're going to get to HTML. I think you can probably guess that. But before we do that, I kind of want to just specify that like HTML isn't the only one. You might have seen a few others. So a few examples are Markdown, which is pretty popular nowadays on sites like, I think Reddit uses it. I think Stack Overflow uses it. It's a pretty common formatting markup language, and you could specify it this way. You could accomplish our above goal this way. Another example is, I should have chosen something that I know how to pronounce. I think this is LaTeX. Something like that. If someone has used it before, please yell at me. But it's a markup language that's used in like kind of complex research paper environments. So a lot of like dissertations and whatnot are written in LaTeX. I think I've never actually used it, but it's a markup language that you can use to tell the computer how to format or what type of content to display your text as. And here's an example of what it would look like in LaTeX. This LaTeX would generate this output, where you have a heading and some regular text. And Wiki Text is another example. This is what Wikipedia is written in. So this is how you do it in Wiki Text. So those are just some examples of different kinds of markup languages, which are different ways to tell the computer how to display your content, your text. And now, drum roll please, we are at HTML. And HTML is Hypertext Markup Language. That's what HTML stands for, which is another markup language. It just uses different kind of symbols or syntax to specify the formatting or the content types of the content. So here's an example of the above goal in HTML. So you have H1, my website, closing tag H1, welcome to my website. These are HTML tags, which we'll talk about in a minute, but they are markup that tell the computer, or in this case the web browser, how to display the content. So if you have this HTML, your web browser will display it as this kind of rendered content. Okay, so that's HTML in a very small nutshell, I think. There's way more to talk about, but that's the idea behind HTML. So next, let's talk about like creating HTML files. And there's a few different ways to do it. In this class, I've kind of given you two options, so maybe I'll just run through both. Let's think about this. So on my own computer, what do I want to do? I want to create a new HTML file. And there are a couple ways to do that. Honestly, one way I often do it is to right-click and go to New, and then go to text document here, and then I make my like index.html file here. My computer's going to yell at me because I'm renaming the extension, but that's okay. So this creates a blank HTML file, and then I can right click it and I can select open with whatever text editor I want to use. In this case, I'm going to use Atom, and then I can type and whatever. So that's one way that I do it. Depending on your settings, that might not work, or it might not be your preferred style. So another way to do it is to open up your text editor at first. So just open it to nothing. And this is just an untitled empty empty text editor, or another option is Notepad. So this is the thing that came with my computer. So all of these are kind of the same kind of path to creating the file. Just get an empty text editor and then save it, and it'll ask you for a path and a file name. So I'm going to just put mine on my desktop, and I can call it whatever. Index.html is like the most common default for various reasons. You can call it whatever you want. You can call it my website is so great.html, as long as it ends in .html. That's kind of the important part. So I'm going to save this, and again, this has saved an empty index.html file to my desktop here. So that's how you create it sort of on your own computer. And let's see if I've forgotten anything. Yeah, good enough. I might come back and talk more about it, but let's see the same kind of thing on Replit. So now I'm going to go to Replit, and on Replit you're looking for, I think, this button here, Add File, and you click that, and then where does that go? So that gives me this text box down here where I can type whatever I want, my amazing webpage.html. Again, you can name it anything you want. And that gives you the blank HTML page here that you can then edit and interact with. So that's two ways of creating a blank HTML file. And then you're free to enter the content, and we'll talk about that probably next. Let's see. Right, yeah. The other thing I want to mention while I'm here in Replit is, this is the project directory, and you're free to work through them and all that good stuff, and that's how we will kind of do the homework assignments each week. But it's very likely that you'll want kind of a neutral location to experiment with and to try things out. And you can either create a new file, just like I just did here, or you can go to this weak ZZ scratch directory, which just contains a few kind of boilerplate files that contain some default content that you're free to mess with. I won't look here. So feel free to put whatever you want in here for experimental, testing purposes. And, it's all good. Anyway, okay, so now we know how to create an HTML file, and now we're going to edit it. So same kind of idea. Let me maybe start over from empty. So if I'm on my computer, the way I usually do it is right click, and then I go to open with, and then I can select a text editor here. Or the other way to do it is to start from your text editor and then go to file, open, and then navigate to the file. In this case, it's an empty file still. We haven't done anything, but if there was content here, it would indeed be here. On Replit, if you're working through Replit, it's a little easier, I think, but yeah, you just click it. You click whatever file you want to open, and it will open in this little middle editor part. So that's kind of opening an HTML file in an editor. So let's maybe add some content. Let's maybe steal some of this content from before. I'm just copying, and you can do this on your own computer, or you can do it in Replit. Does not matter. They both should work. Let me maybe make this a little bigger. So I've just pasted the HTML content into my empty index.html file, and I've saved it. So now my index.html file contains this HTML, these two lines of HTML. So I'm going to minimize that. And now we are at viewing the sort of resulting web page. So I have this index.html file. Right now it's just on my desktop, and I can right click that, and I can go to what? I can go to open with, and then I can choose my browser. I'm going to use Google Chrome probably throughout the rest of this class. So I recommend using the same thing, but you're free to use whatever you want. So I'm going to select Google Chrome, and it does indeed open up my local file. And you'll notice that it has like this file URL here, and it starts with like, this is the full path on my computer. The other way to do it is from Chrome itself. I'm going to click Control-O, and that'll open up this sort of dialog that lets me select whatever file I want, and it can be a local file. So I go here, and same kind of deal. I'm just opening up the HTML file that I created. So the idea would be, see if I can move this stuff around a little bit. So I have my file here on the left, my in my code editor, my text editor, and I have the rendered version in the browser over here. So I can make changes. So maybe I say like my amazing website, and I'm going to save this just from like Control S or File Save, and then I'm going to go over here and I'm going to refresh. So now I can see the sort of rendered output that the browser is creating based on the HTML that I've created in the actual file. And again, I'll kind of maybe pause here and point out that like it's called markup because like you don't see this H1 in the rendered output. Like you don't see H1 here, you don't see P here, because this is markup. It's not part of the actual content. It's marking up the content. That's kind of where the word markup comes from. Anyway, same kind of deal in Replit. So let me go back here. Let's make this a little bigger. And where am I? So I have my amazing web page. What I can do is maybe I'll copy the same content over to Replit. So just copy pasting my way to victory, and I have, here's my content, and I can click run. And now Replit's going to be a little weird, or maybe weird's the wrong word, but Replit is going to take you to the top level index.html file every time you click run. So you're going to have to navigate to it. Let's see if this works. Can I type in here? Maybe I should have thought about this before I recorded the video, but I don't actually know how to do this. No, I can't. So what I would do if I were you is modify the index.html file to link to the whatever file you want to edit in Replit. So in this case, I'm going to say href equals, and then the name. Don't worry too much about this. I think that for our purposes, I think if you just stick to the Scratch directory, I think that'll be a lot easier, but I'm just going to show you kind of behind the scenes how this works. myamazingwebpage.html, myamazingwebpage, yeah, that's fine, and then A, and then P. We'll talk about HTML tags in a second, but I just want to get this working. And I can run this, and indeed, here is the link, which will take me to the file, to the output, the rendered output of this file. So let's see. I think I can maybe do my amazing website here, save it, and I think refresh instead. And okay, that takes me to the top level again. It's kind of annoying, but you can click back in and go to my amazing website, and there it is. There might be other ways to do it, so I don't know. Let's experiment. If I open this in a new tab, does this work? If I go here, and yeah, I think maybe this is maybe a better way to do it. So now I'm over here, and I want to make a change like my really amazing website, and I've saved. Can I go back here and refresh? Yeah, I can. So that's maybe how I would recommend doing it, popping it out into a new tab. And then you have kind of the same setup as on desktop. You have your code editor here, and then you have your output here that you can refresh whenever you make a change to confirm that your HTML does indeed do the right thing. Cool. So that's editing your HTML in both on both your computer and in Replit. So let me maybe just point out on the desktop version. So I've got my repo here. Here's my repo checked out onto my own computer. It's just on my desktop. And here's the same like weak ZZ Scratch directory. So you can maybe right click this and open this with your text editor. And that's a way to just have everything in one place. It's kind of, it's up to you what you prefer. As long as you're editing it and then pushing it to GitHub, I don't really care about your local setup. However you want to do it is fine, but I'm going to throw some options at you, and you can choose from all of the above. So whether you want to stick with this weak ZZ directory, or if you want to have files like on your desktop or anywhere else to test, it's all good. It's kind of whatever makes your life easier is good with me. All right, so that's editing HTML files and viewing HTML files actually. So we know how to do all of that. And now we are ready to talk about like what exactly just happened. So we've seen HTML tags, And we know how to write them and then to render them in the browser just by kind of navigating to the file in your browser. But like, what the heck just happened? Good question. So let me go back to, I don't know, let me go to the index.html file that we created, the sort of simpler one. So here we have a couple examples of HTML tags. So an HTML tag it's often like an abbreviation or a symbol or just a couple of letters that tell the browser what kind of content the text is, or what type of content to show. So in this case, you have an H1 tag, it's called, which tells the browser that you should render this content as a heading. So you have the opening tag, which is, here, I'll maybe just retype it to talk through it. So you have an opening tag with angle brackets. So I often like type angle brackets first, and then you type the name of the tag. So maybe I'll add another one, maybe like an H2. And then you have some content after your opening HTML tags, like my really amazing website. These are just examples. Don't worry too much about the dumb content. And then you have a closing tag, which looks a lot like an opening tag, but has an extra sort of slash in it. So you have your angle bracket and then a slash and then the tag that you're closing. And I'll tell you ahead of time that like the number one thing that you're going to hit in the next week or two is messing up this this closing tag. And it's normal, totally normal part of coding HTML. It happens to every single one of us. But if your content ends up looking a little wonky, it's probably because you didn't have the closing tag here. Maybe I'll show an example of that in a minute. So that's kind of HTML tags. You have the opening tag, then some content, and then the closing tag, which says now we're done rendering this as whatever, in this case a heading. So let me go back to my browser and maybe refresh and see what that looks like. Where did I put that? Here. So now you see, like, here's my H1 content, here's my H2 content, which is like a slightly smaller heading, like a second level heading, and then here's our regular text. And I think I'm not going to do this exact same thing in Replit from here on out. I think the flow is very similar, whether you're editing it in Replit or on the desktop. So, but if you have questions, let me know. So that's how to make an HTML tag. Now here comes like what I am guessing that you thought this class would be, which is me throwing a bunch of HTML tags at you. And I'm actually not going to do that because from my perspective, believe it or not, the secret is that I don't actually care about you learning HTML tags. I actually don't want you to memorize a bunch of HTML tags because nobody does. I've been a software engineer for over a decade, and I've been a web developer for like 7 of those years. And I don't know every HTML tag. I don't want to know every HTML tag. It wouldn't be helpful for me to know every HTML tag. So I don't want you to go into this class thinking like you have to memorize the hundreds of HTML tags that there are, because you don't have to. More importantly than that, way more important than memorizing a bunch of HTML tags is sort of the meta process of finding HTML tags. So I don't know. I didn't plan any of this ahead. Maybe I should have, but whatever. Let's say I have a goal. I want to, I don't know, maybe I want to add a list. So I want to add a list of my favorite animals or something. So I want to have like, I don't know, cats, lizards, and what's another favorite animal? If this was a live class, I would ask for other people's favorite animals, but I'll say monkeys. I don't know if that's my actual favorite animals, but those are the first 3 animals that came to mind. So I want this to be a list. So let's just see what this does with no HTML. So I'm going to maybe move some stuff around. So I've got my, in theory, list here, my list of 3 animals. I'm going to refresh, and what? It shows up on one line, and it's not a list. What the heck? And that's because there's no HTML tags around it, so like it doesn't know how to render it, and HTML kind of ignores white space. So like you could put new lines anywhere you wanted, and it would just kind of show up on one line. But this is clearly not a list, certainly not a bulleted list. And so rather than expecting you to memorize how to make a bulleted list in your brain and just output it into the text editor and then have it right 100% of the time, don't do it. Instead, what I would do is go to a search engine, whatever search engine you want to use, and I would type in something like HTML, I don't know, list tag maybe. And then there are a couple of pages that I usually trust. W3 Schools is one of them. It's in fact I think my favorite. There's another one called MDN, but here's a page that looks pretty promising. HTML lists. And yeah, okay, unordered HTML list, blah, 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 or ordered HTML list, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, cool. So you can kind of see some options. And then here's an example of the HTML. And that looks pretty promising. And you can maybe click through, and there's a try it yourself thing where you can maybe experiment. So like, I don't actually like coffee. I'm more of a diet soda kind of guy. Not proud of it, but it's true. So I can run this and like test out the, what that looks like and how that works. And, that's cool. Seems to be very close to what I actually wanted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy it and maybe close some stuff out because my tabs are getting messy, and paste it in, and then kind of fiddle with it to make it my own. So I wanted to show my favorite animals, lizards and monkeys. And now I can delete this. And I saved it, and I'm going to go back to my browser and I'm going to refresh. And there we go. There's my rendered list of my favorite animals. And maybe I would add like a p tag here saying like, here are my favorite animals, and then refresh. And there we go. We have a list of my favorite animals. But sort of the meta lesson that I want to impart in this class is don't try to memorize everything. Don't try to memorize much. You'll eventually kind of get a knack for like the tags you use a lot. So like p tag, I generally don't have to look up p tag, but especially if you're just starting out, like don't try to memorize anything. Instead, try to practice that process of having a goal. In this case, it was, I want to show a list of my favorite animals, and then going to your favorite search engine, typing in some kind of query that's like HTML, blah, blah, blah tag, and then reading through the documentation, trying something out, and then sort of using that in your actual project or in your content or in whatever space you're currently in. Whether it's like a test file on your desktop or in a project file in the project repo. So yeah, I'm not going to teach you any HTML tags. I'm going to teach you how to use search engines. There are worse takeaways, honestly, but that's kind of where my head's at. So rather than leaving you there, I will say that there are some resources that I recommend. So for example, I wrote this list of some of the most used tags, and you can read through that. In fact, I highly recommend reading through that, and it's a bunch of examples that you can play with around different types of tags. You also, like I just demoed, like you can use a search engine and find things that way. You can also use W3 Schools, which is what we looked at before. Which has a ton of HTML tutorials and HTML tag references and all that good stuff. And then MDN is another really good resource. I think it's Mozilla document. I don't actually know. Who cares? It's MDN. I just know it as MDN. But their documentation is really great, and you can read through this and find more references and more information about like a particular tag that you want to use, and then iterate and then bring it over to your actual project. Okay, so that's that's HTML tags. That's about as far as I'm going to go on HTML tags. You now have the power to do your own sort of researching and experimenting and bringing that over. So that's about as far as I'm going to go with HTML tags. Of course, if you have questions, please let me know. So now let's talk about like deploying HTML files, which if you've watched the other videos that for the setup steps you've actually done before, but I want to make sure that we're all sort of on the same page because there's a bunch of little things you have to remember to do. So long story short, the way we are going to deploy our HTML files is by pushing our changes to our GitHub repo. So anything that's on your GitHub repo is sort of the official published version. I am not going to look in your Replit project. I'm not going to look, well, certainly not going to look on your computer because that's your computer. GitHub's the only place I'm going to look. So the way you can do that is, let me close some of these windows down. Let's do this. So right now on the desktop, I'm going to start with, I have this index.html file that's just kind of hanging out on my desktop, and that's fine for testing. But I can't really show that to anybody else. I can't like give someone a URL to this page, this file. So like if I go here, this file URL, I can't send this to somebody else and have them look at it. If I could, that would be horrible for security. But this won't work on anybody else's computer. So what I need to do is first like put it into my GitHub repo, so I can open up where I downloaded my GitHub repo. I put it on my desktop for now, and I could copy it in somewhere. I called it index.html. Maybe I'll rename it like animals.html. Is that reasonable? Sure. And I'm going to just copy it over. And the other thing you can do is, like I said, like use this weekzz scratch folder. This is already in there, so you don't have to worry about like that copying step. So you can edit this file if you want to. It's all up to you. But anyway, now whether I copied over a file or I edited an existing file, doesn't actually matter. But I can open up GitHub desktop, and here I can see the change I made, which is indeed animals.html. And here's the content that I wrote. So add list of my favorite animals. I'll maybe clean it up. Okay, add list of my favorite animals. I'm going to commit this. And again, this is a step that I kind of forget sometimes, but committing is not, you're not done. When you commit, you have to push. You have to click this button or this button, do the same thing, push origin. And that'll do its thing, and it'll upload the change to GitHub. So now I can go back to GitHub, and I can refresh my repo homepage, and I should see animals.html. There it is. And I can see the content. There it is. And now we play the game of waiting for GitHub pages to finish deploying. So let me stalk it a little bit. So here's a page that I kind of stare at a lot when I'm using GitHub pages, especially recently for some reason. GitHub page is going to take a minute to do its thing, but it's going to deploy the change to our sort of live URL, which we have somewhere. This is your username.github.io/intro to webdev / whatever. Going to depend on the file name. Okay, now it's starting, it's in progress. I should have come with like a list of jokes to tell while I wait or something. All right, now it's active. So that means that I can view whatever is in my repo on my live URL. So I didn't actually write a link to the file, but that's okay because I think I can remember it. It's just animals.html, and I can hit enter, and there it is. Here's the rendered content in our live URL, and this URL will work for anybody with an internet connection. So this is the kind of URL that you're going to share with me and share with the class and all that good stuff. It's going to be like your username.github.io/stuff. So that's deploying your change on desktop. Replit is very similar. You've made a change. What did I change here? I just changed the I just added my amazing web page. Let's check out the version control tab. And yeah, okay. So here's I don't know, maybe this is an interesting artifact of using GitHub. So because GitHub, you can think of GitHub as like the published live version. It's like the source of truth. And right now I have two different copies of the GitHub repo. I have one on my desktop and I have one in Replit. And I've done that to show both approaches. But because I just published something from my desktop, Replit knows about it basically because it's connected to that GitHub. So it's telling me that I'm actually behind the main GitHub repo. So I can pull the change to bring it in. So right now, for example, I don't have that animals.html file. If I go to version control, I can pull it. And you can do the same thing from GitHub Desktop. It works both directions. I just happen to do this second. So now I do indeed have animals.html sort of in both places. Anyway, that was kind of a random aside. What I actually came here to do was go to the version control tab, and I want to commit and push the change that we made here, which was what? Index.html. I made a change. Oh, I added the link. I added this link to my amazing web page. And then my amazing web page is the content that we created in Replit however many minutes ago. So added a really amazing web page. That'll be my commit message, and I'll commit and push. And it's the same exact process from the desktop. So right now I've pushed to the GitHub repo. So now if I refresh here, we will see my amazing web page here. And I also changed index, so that's why it has the same commit message here. And GitHub Pages will do its thing, and eventually will show the differences, show the changes. I don't know if I'm going to stick around and wait for it though. So that's pushing your changes or publishing your changes after you've written them. So we're just about done with what I wanted to talk about. Let's see. So I know I've talked pretty fast, and you can maybe go back and watch it in 0.5 speed if you need to. But what we've done so far is we've talked about HTML content and like different kinds of markup. We've looked at creating and editing HTML files by like typing HTML into the editor. And viewing it in your sort of local browser. So whether that's viewing a file that's on your computer with like the file URL, or it's hitting the run button in Replit, both things do the same thing. You're viewing the HTML files like the local version of your changes. Then we talked about different kinds of HTML tags, and more importantly, we talked about the idea of researching HTML tags and finding new ones and experimenting and playing with it. And what we just did was we talked about deploying HTML files by pushing them to GitHub. Okay, I know that's a lot. So what I'll say is next, the first thing I wanted you to sort of take away from this class was don't memorize anything. Rather than trying to memorize a bunch of HTML tags, instead like focus on the process of looking stuff up, experimenting, and then working with what you learned. It's very related to that, but another really important skill when you're coding or really doing anything, I think, is the idea of iterating. And by that I mean like work in small pieces. So if I go back to, the file that I keep editing and then closing over and over again, the way I made changes, I didn't type all of this content at once, right? I didn't start with a blank file and then, I started with a blank file and pasted in these two lines. That's fair. But I didn't then say, and I'm going to write all of my content in one little, like, one session of coding, and then only after I'm done writing my content, then I'm going to open it up in my browser. I didn't do that because that way you are guaranteed to be frustrated. Coding involves a lot of like making smallish mistakes and like scratching your head and maybe banging your head against the desk, to be honest with you, and figuring it out and debugging and stuff. And that's really only possible if you code in really small pieces. So I added like one line at a time, or like in this case I added, this much code. I didn't type this whole thing out. So as you start coding, as you start working on the projects this week, I really encourage you to work in really small pieces, like smaller than you think is interesting, honestly. Like write one line of HTML, get one tag working, test that locally in your local browser, get that working, and then push it to GitHub. Because then you have like a fallback point if you get into a situation where you want to like roll back and go back to like a thing that worked. So work in tiny steps. That's one of the most important things I can sort of teach you, right next to like researching and like reading through documentation and stuff. That's the most important thing. Second most important thing is work in small pieces. And like way down here is like what to type, the syntax of HTML tags and whatnot. All right, I'm not going to get too preachy there, but I just really encourage you to iterate in small pieces. Okay, and then the very last thing I want to talk about is kind of related to that, actually, and let's talk about debugging for just a second. I know this is kind of getting long, so I'm going to maybe just breeze through this real quick. So let's say I have my animals file, which again I keep closing for some reason, and I don't know, let's say I'm typing, and here's a common mistake that I guarantee we're all going to make, including me. I'm typing some HTML, and I've got the opening tag, and I've got some content, and then I think I have the closing tag, but really I forgot the slash. This happens all the time. It's going to happen to you. It's okay that it's going to happen, but it's going to happen. Let's see what that looks like. So I'm going to open up my file, my local file here, and I'm going to refresh, and it's because I moved it, isn't it? Yeah, all right. Let's open it up from here. Yep. Open with Chrome, sure. All right, so here we go. I look at this and I say, what happened? Oh my God, why is everything huge and bold? I didn't want my lizards to be huge and bold. And I could, maybe go back to my editor and like really squint and like really look at like exactly what's happening. But another really handy tool is the developer tools that come with your browser. So a few ways to do that. One is in here. If I go up to this three-dot menu, I can go to More Tools and then Developer Tools. I can open it up this way. You can move it around if you want. You can put it like over here on the right, or you can pop it out. It doesn't really matter. But this shows you a view of like, I don't know, the inner workings of this. So mine's on the console. You kind of, for the first week, I recommend checking out this Elements tab, and it'll show you the content in a view that's like, here's what the browser is understanding the content to be. The other way to get to it is by right-clicking and clicking Inspect. It'll open up the same exact thing, but it'll open it like to the thing you clicked. So that's pretty handy. And in this case, we can see that like, okay, I've got my H1 tag, I've got my H2 tag, and then wait, I've got another H2 tag, and like that's not right? So this will give you like the hint that something wonky is happening around like here or here in your code. H2, like I don't have another H2, do I? So that would tell me that I need to go back to my code, and like it would tell me that the problem is here-ish. And then it focuses my squinting at least, and I know to look around here, and then I can say, oh, okay, yeah, I remember now. I have to have that closing H2 tag. I remember Kevin saying that would happen, and now I can refresh, and okay, that is indeed what I expected. Okay, cool. And the same exact thing in Replit, just real quick. You can inspect over here, but my computer will probably melt if I try that. So like we saw earlier, you can pop it out into a new tab, and you can maybe do it a little easier over here. So you can inspect when it's in its like standalone window. So your developer tools here, and specifically the Elements tab for the first couple weeks, these are going to be your best friends when you're debugging and when you encounter a problem. So I kind of just keep them open, honestly. All right, cool. I think that's it. The other additional resources I have are just things that you might have fun with or that might be useful, so check them out at your leisure. But this is, I think, as far as I wanted to go with HTML tags. Again, I'll just like reiterate that The important thing in this class won't be memorizing specific sequences of keys to type. I don't care about you memorizing HTML tags. What I care about is that you know how to learn about new HTML tags, and that's a combination of using your favorite search engine, looking through documentation, looking through W3 schools and MDN, and experimenting maybe in like a Scratch file or something, like we saw with like the standalone index file or like the animals file here. And only when you have something that like you understand and makes sense, then you bring it over into your main project and then you push it to GitHub. But work iteratively and work in small pieces that way. All right, cool. So that's what I wanted to talk about. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that you need to know. No. Whatever. If there is, I'll save it for the next video. So at this point, you know the core concepts that I was hoping that we would talk about in this week. So you can go back to the main page for this week and start to work on the project itself. But I'll save that. I'll save talking about the project for the next video. All right. See ya.